you're not familiar with the rapid response teams, we're trying to make sure that the federal resources are getting closer to those who need to be engaged, closer to the communities. And so the rapid response teams that we've launched so far in six communities, 4 of which are represented here, are the grouping of federal agencies, part of the interagency working group, and in some instances, not actually officially by the executive order part of the IWG, but agencies who have equities in the communities. And it's much more of a relationship building with the local communities. And you'll hear some great examples of this, and I'll tee them up. And I want to thank Jon Grosshans from the US EPA and EPA in general. As you'll see, there's a little theme here. The EPA has really stepped up as a partner along with our other federal agencies in this effort. Partly because we have a ground game, and that ground game is much closer to building relationships with communities. Joining Jon is Terri Dean, who is the Rapid Response Team lead in Pennsylvania, and Terry's the Chief of Staff in Region 3. Next to Terri is Kevin John, who's a Program Manager at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, representing our Four Corners Rapid Response Team, and Carolyn Bryan, who's a Regional Planner in Region 8, and is the Rapid Response Team lead in Wyoming. And so I guess I miscounted. I was counting 3, not 4. And really appreciate all the work that they do. Is Karen not joining us? Okay, that's what it was. And so I'll turn it over to you, Jon, and thank you so much to our Rapid Response Team leads.
Thank you, Bryan. I think we've been building towards this discussion all day long. We've had a lot of these discussion themes popping up earlier. As Bryan said, my name is Jon Grosshans. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency, and I come from the industrial Midwest, and I feel like we've seen a number of these economic transitions over the years, whether it's military bases, auto sector. There's always this need to have economic diversification and transition that takes place. And what's the difference maker is oftentimes it's closing that gap that exists between community needs and the resources that are available, and really being able to make sure that there's a response that happens across all those potential gaps. And I think that the Rapid Response Team, and this panel specifically, is really good about closing that gap in this instance. We often talk about the missing middle in other policy topics, whether it's housing or whether it's supply chains. And I feel like the Rapid Response Team answers that question of the missing middle. When you've got all these federal resources that are available, you've got all this potential support, but all these communities that also need help and are in distress, how do you connect those two dots? And how do you make sure that the gap gets closed? I feel like this room is really stakeholders, thought leaders, others that are closing that gap. So thank you for being here today and joining this discussion. I'm going to be throwing some questions out to our rapid response teams here, so you all can hear a little bit of a kind of report out from the field. What are some of the questions that are out there? What are some of the early wins? What does this look like? And hopefully this is helpful to you as you're doing your own work or in one of these regions coordinating with these rapid response teams already. So maybe I'll just have folks do a little quick intro, a little bit of 1-minute overview, and if we could maybe look at the slides too. We could have a 1-minute overview of kind of your region, kind of what you're experiencing in your transition. And Kevin, you want to kick us off with that overview, and then we can go into questions.
Sure, thank you, Jon. Again, my name is Kevin John from Los Alamos National Lab. I put my email in the slide here, should anyone want to contact me after today. And just briefly kind of outlining the scope of the Four Corners Rapid Response Team in terms of overall geography. The square in red really sort of represents the area that I've been covering, including northwest New Mexico, northern Arizona, Navajo and Hopi nations, and really represents 7 individual coal-generating power plants that are either closed already or are in transition to close. And you can see that on the upper right-hand side in terms of the coal plant timelines. Time is not an ally, as everyone in this room knows. We're really looking at communities that are undergoing sort of crisis now from coal plant closures, and communities that will at some point in the foreseeable future. And I think common themes that have emerged in the Four Corners that I've heard throughout the day today is community need to build up capacity, to share information and to build, this sort of a connective tissue through collaboration in terms of coalition building. So with that, happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carolyn. I work in Wyoming on the rapid response team, and we started back in 2021. We were the pilot program. I would like to take credit for it, but I wasn't around then, so I can't. And we have had some great engagement with Wyoming over the years that has started slow and has really progressed into something that is beneficial for everyone within the community. And we have 3 counties that we focus on, but we really cover the entire state of Wyoming. And we've done that through really strong partnership with the state. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that later, but this strong partnership has allowed us to not only provide information about federal funding, but now we're trying to flip that on its head a little bit and really hear from our communities the problems that they want to address, and we respond as a federal family, and then in partnership with the state, and then filling those gaps as needed with philanthropy. So that's what we're working on.
Hi, my name is Terri Dean, and I am with the Pennsylvania Rapid Response Team. I'm the baby of the group. We just started less than a year ago, but actually in earnest about 6 months ago. And typically the chief of staff doesn't get involved in this kind of work, but I think like a career person. So I wanted to find out more about how we can connect the federal government to actual, I call it families, on the ground that are affected by these coal plant closures. So I raised my hand when the 2 people that were handling the work decided to retire, and I said, I'll take it on, and I cannot be happier to meet my brother, my sister in person for the first time today. But I'm super happy. I didn't put my email address on there, but it's dean.terri@epa.gov. And Mary Ann Carroll, who's not here, but she's a very, very strong supporter of the work that we're doing in Pennsylvania. Like I said, we just got started about 6 months ago after a launch last fall in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that I think I have found to be most valuable is that we're working with 6 counties, primarily in the western part of the state, and we have actually had in-person meetings. The goal was to have it with all 6. We were able to do it with 3. And the difference that it made, I think, in making that connective tissue happen between the federal government and the communities, the counties themselves, was phenomenal. They said, you've personalized and made it real, and I think that's probably true of the work that's happening in all the rapid response teams. We have excellent representation on our rapid response team from federal, state, municipal, county reps, and I didn't put the unions on there, but we do have, I met with Eric Baker, who is the local IBEW 459 president, and he's made sure that we're very, very well connected to what the workers are saying, and so we're continuing that dialogue, and certainly made great contacts here today in terms of those partnerships. One of the things that's making it work so well for us, because we are the federal government and we tend to be somewhat disconnected, is working with the local development districts. We have established a really strong rapport and relationship with the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission. They're really our conduit to get to the counties, and it just so happens that they serve all 6 plus 4 more counties in that part of the state. And then also the Southwestern Pennsylvania Hub. That has been an extremely successful partnership for us as we're getting off the ground in Pennsylvania. And that really comes about from funding from a foundation, the Heinz Foundation. And as we began to look at the kind of partnerships that we wanted to build, it really was about philanthropy and also private industry as we're looking to really grow the impact of the rapid response team. We have a lot of heavy lifts in front of us. We'll be busy sharing funding opportunities. We're going to be hosting agency-specific webinars. And one of the goals for us in Pennsylvania is to make it as county-specific as possible. So, for example, we just are hosting a series of 6 individual Brownfields 101 sessions from the EPA. I've got Water Division up next to talk about all the water infrastructure funds that are available. We'll be working with all the other federal families members to come and do that, in close partnership with our state, with the Department of Community and Economic Development, and also our Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So planning to bring everybody together, though, in an opportunities conference. It may be virtual, but we want to make sure that at all times, all of those that we're supporting in the communities and in the counties know who to go to, who's their ombudsman within the federal government, within the state government, and they already know who their local contacts are. So thank you for the opportunity to be in this role.
And in our this table discussion, we had a lot of different perspectives from different geographies. I think you're already getting a sampler of different regional perspectives here, just in the introductions. So just to kick off a question here, I think that response is really the theme of the response team. Can you all share a little bit of how you're engaging in your region, who you're engaging with? I know you touched on a little bit with the intros, and a little bit of what you're hearing. So kind of that listening mode, what are some of the needs that you're getting from your regions, and thinking about what does that response start to look like?
What we're hearing, I think it's probably true no matter where we are in the country, is capacity, capacity, capacity. The counties that we've met with have said they don't have the resources in terms of headcount, full-time equivalent people to apply for these grants. And then not just, let's say we apply and we win, how do we manage it? So that's been a huge concern that we've had. They're grateful for the opportunity to know about the grants, and they don't want to go to grants.gov to find them. And so that's, okay, I shouldn't have said that. But come on now, we know we're going to speak the truth up here. But they don't want to navigate grants.gov. But that's where I think partnerships are so important. That's where the AmeriCorps Vista members will come in handy for us, and they're going to be in our territory, thank God. And also the Southwest Pennsylvania Hub. They're our conduit to try to help bridge that gap between we need the money, but we don't know where to go get it and how to access it, and therefore how to project management. So capacity is probably the biggest one that I've heard of. And then I'll quickly say, in addition to that, it's matching funds. It's very hard. There's not a lot of deep pockets in these communities, and so they're very concerned about how do they get access to the funds, either through an application or through matches. And so I'll pass the mic down to Kevin.
Thank you. I think for us, we really started our journey with a very significant community kickoff meeting where we went to one of the local colleges in Farmington, New Mexico, and brought together tribal, non-tribal leaders, leaders from industry, non-government organizations, and really heard what was important to the community at that time. And that really defined the first 6 months of our focus in terms of just getting out on the road, putting a lot of miles in my car in terms of meeting people face to face, directly in their communities, in their facilities, and just hearing what was important to them, and then coalescing all that information for roll-up to the IWG in terms of what lessons we were learning, and sort of defining our path forward for the next year and a half. But I think really the key the key factor is just meeting people where they are in the communities and hearing what's important to them, making sure they feel that they have a seat at the table in terms of what bill and IRA opportunities represent.
Yeah, and the other piece that I'll add is within Wyoming, we started off with listening sessions, and that was kind of the impetus that got us going, but we didn't stop listening. So I think our coordination that we have with the state and with the stakeholders, we meet on a bi-weekly basis. So we're meeting every other week for 30 minutes to have a discussion to make sure that we're on track to address any issues that may come up. And then that has allowed us to be very agile. So if something comes up and a stakeholder within Wyoming says, we have no idea what to include in this community benefits plan. We don't know what we need to put in there, what is required, how are we being scored. We're able to respond in a very efficient way where within the month we have a presentation on exactly what a community benefits plan is, what's expected, how Wyoming can use it to their advantage to apply for these grants. And we were able to do that so quickly, which is not something that you usually hear within the federal government. So that constant communication, not only with our Wyoming stakeholders, but then also on the federal side, our federal team meets monthly, and we have some federal folks here that are on those calls, and we then triage there. Here's what we're hearing within Wyoming. Who can help? How can we make sure that we're getting the resources that they need, and translating this information in a way that's palatable to people who don't work in the federal government, which most people do not. So I think that constant communication has allowed us to respond in a way that's more efficient and allow us to be a little bit more agile rather than just pushing funding to them that may or may not be applicable.
If I could just add one more comment too, and I heard it earlier today, it said there may be common challenges, but not every solution is going to fit every single challenge. And so one of the things that we're working on right now is, in addition to having that in-person contact, is really listening carefully and letting each of the counties describe to us what success looks like for them. So we're not trying to be prescriptive, but basically responsive, I think to your word, responsive, so that what works in Armstrong County might not work in Indiana County, might not work in Fayette, might not work in Beaver or Greene or Washington. Those are our 6 counties. But find out specifically in all those, and we're learning from you, Carol, in terms of every 2 weeks, talk with them, find out how you measure success, and then hold us accountable as the leaders of this federal agency, leaders of this federal family, to link those resources and then meet success as you define success.
This is great. I feel like we're already getting some lessons learned out here and a good flavor of kind of where you're all at, where the regions are at. Sounds like frequent conversations are really helpful, but I know oftentimes people want those results. So can we talk a little bit about kind of what has been accomplished, and specifically any early wins that you can share from your region as you're moving towards those longer goals? I know we're all struggling to deliver on bigger picture items. At the same time, we're trying to get these early projects underway. Can you just share a little bit of kind of what you see as an early win kind of on your way to that longer journey of economic transformation in your community? Let's take that one first.
I guess I'll jump in here. I can think of 3 very distinct wins, within the Four Corners region. I think first, a shout out to Jack, NATO, and Grace from NACO. I think for some of the work they've done in terms of developing the Building Resilient Resilient Economies and Coal Communities program, to really stimulate strategic thinking within these communities, both in New Mexico and in northern Arizona, really developing some really powerful strategies and plans to drive communities forward. I think in New Mexico, legislation was passed in advance of the closure of the San Juan generating station. The Energy Transition Act really provided a provision for helping displaced coal mine workers, plant workers, and support industry workers to sort of navigate what comes next in terms of bridge funding and worker reskilling and retraining. And then I think the third win, I really have to credit, I think, the IWG's role in terms of bringing large industry to the table in terms of labor engagement, in particular working with D.E. Shaw and the San Juan Solar Phase 1 effort to really take some of these displaced workers from the San Juan generating station and employ them almost immediately after closure in terms of construction jobs for the 200 megawatt facility that came online, is coming online now. So thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Kevin. Carolyn?
Yeah, so besides some additional funding, whether it's through brownfields revitalization or EDA creating an economic recovery corps person, and setting up an office of economic transformation out of Gillette, and I know Rusty Bell is here, and you need people like Rusty Bell in your corner to make these things successful. I would say another win is through our partnership with the state, we created a funding summit that we've been hosting now on a yearly basis. And that funding summit is preceded, and it's not hosted by the federal government, but by the state and the Senator Lummis's office of grant training. So 3 days, 2 days of grant training 101, and this year it was a 101 and a 102. So those who have gone through the 101 and are now moving on through. And that on-the-ground training has been extremely beneficial. And this came from this partnership of talking of here are where our capacity needs are. And then from that grant training, everyone's feeling really revved up. And then they have our federal partners come in and tell them all about the grants that may be available to them. And then after that, we have these office hours where they're able to talk and say, here's everything that I've learned, here's what you've brought to us, and then how can we make it happen? And that has been extremely, extremely helpful for moving some of those on-the-ground wins forward within Wyoming.
And I'm still going to get there. We're going to have some wins, but I will say this, though. The fact that we are already beginning to offer 101s to our counties and then encourage them to take advantage of those. So I'm going to, as you already know, we have best management practices going on up here, so we will steal shamelessly, and I will follow your lead.
So, and that's the next question. And I will say just really quickly, since you mentioned working with other partners, we work really closely with U.S. Department of Agriculture, and a lot of the rapid response teams are led by USDA staff on the ground. I know I saw Ryan Thorne and Jonathan McCracken and Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan, who are leading those other efforts in other places and couldn't be up here on the stage today, but have that similar role. So there's a lot of activity that's taking place within the federal family to make sure we're kind of closing that gap that does exist. So we talked a little bit about some lessons learned. We're seeing some common themes. Since we've got a room full of stakeholders, we're having this retreat. Any lessons learned that you want to share? I know it's still early days, but any thoughts for those that are doing this work at the state, those that are starting to self-organize within their community, looking at transition, transformation that's on the horizon? What are they going to be doing to pull together that team? Kind of any organizational lessons learned that could be shared with this group from your own regional experience?
Go ahead.
I have a bunch.
I
I would say really getting to know the community that you're working in is like first and foremost. Even the language that they use is incredibly important. These communities know what they need. They're very smart, and they know what they need in order to transform their economy, and they have ideas. And their ideas are great. So listening is definitely the first step. The second, and I'm going to keep coming back to partnership. Glenn Pauly at USDA Rural Development, we have conversations all the time because he is so connected within Wyoming. So knowing who your people are, and someone said it today at a group, a community quarterback. Like Glenn is my community quarterback for USDA Rural Development, and then having someone like Drew Palmer who works in the state budget department, I'm pointing back to her, she is our community quarterback. People really don't want to listen to me and the EPA tell them what I think would be best for their transition, especially within Wyoming. So having people and partners like Drew to talk with and to level set has been instrumental in our success, and really relying within the state for they know where to go. So our job is to best support them has been incredibly helpful. And if you can start from there, I think that's a great place to start.
And I would just echo that as well to say that we've developed a really good relationship, obviously, with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. We work very closely with them on myriad things, but especially on this. And also our Department of Community and Economic Development at the state level, and working closely with the Governor's Office of Critical Investment. So make sure, just to echo what Carolyn is saying in terms of the strength of those partnerships, they know where the needs are, they know who the people are. And by the way, I'm going to steal quarterbacks, because I was saying SPOCs, single points of contact. But I like quarterbacks better, although I'm a Trekkie. But I'm really focused on making sure that we have a point to reach into the communities, to reach into the counties, and then they know who all the key players are. We can't possibly know who they are, but we know what the strategic relationships are that we have to build and maintain those relationships with.
And I think the only thing I'll pile on here is that, there are a lot of resources already developed within communities. I think Jack Morgan brought this up earlier in terms of, the regional councils of government and the comprehensive economic development, strategies that are routinely, developed and updated represent a tremendous sort of kickoff point for sort of, planning and sort of thought process.
That's great. So hopefully those lessons learned are useful to this audience. I know this audience is also chock full of your own lessons learned because you're doing it on the ground. And so this is really helpful to have this discussion today. So we're going to have a little time for questions. So folks want to ask questions of the panel. We've got time for that right now because this is supposed to be interactive. So think of those questions. While you're doing that, one last question for the panel. What's coming next? So looking ahead to some next steps, can you each maybe offer one thing that's kind of coming up, something you're looking forward to, event, milestone, a direction you're heading, just to kind of give us a taste of where we're going in the next 6 months or so? Carolyn?
Sure. So the state of Wyoming, the state budget department has set up a whole technical assistance support specifically for grants. And so they are putting just as much effort as we are to make this really, really work. And what we have, and we beg, borrow, and steal from everyone. So from Illinois Basin, we stole this idea of a funding review. So we've been having these grant trainings that lead into a federal funding summit where we provide information, but we're really now trying to flip that on its head and have communities identify issues within their community, come to us, come to the federal partners, come to the state partners and say, here's the problem that we're trying to solve. How can you help us solve it? So rather than us saying, we have $100 billion in X, Y, and Z, and most of the community is like, am I eligible? How much money would I actually receive? We're trying to flip that on its head and say, here's the problem, here's the issue area. Is it a federal answer? Is it a state answer? Is it a philanthropic answer? Is it a mixture of all three? And with this coordination that has been happening over the years, we really feel like we're in a good place to say it might not be an EPA answer, but it may very well be a USDA rural development answer. And it may not be USDA rural development, but it may be a combo of USDA rural development in the state. And if we can't do that, then maybe philanthropy can step in and help us because we have these communities really identifying the issues that they want to work on. So if we can get that going and moving within the next year, I think that would be a really positive step for us.
I'm looking for a strong win in terms of a funding opportunity for our stakeholders. They're eager, they're chomping at the bit. They know where the money is, they're just not sure how to get to it, and that's where Megan comes in. Megan, I see you back there smiling from Southwest PA Hub. We're going to get some wins for these counties. We're going to make sure that their workers don't feel left behind, their families are taken care of. So I'm looking for a win, and so Megan, don't feel any pressure. But we're going to make that happen, certainly in Pennsylvania. So I'm eager to continue to learn from my partners here on the stage. There are others I've been taking notes of. I've heard someone say Pennsylvania when they were speaking, so I'll be in touch. I'm dean.terri@epa.gov, so I very much want to hear from you.
Kevin?
Yeah, and I'll just give a shout out to Pennsylvania because I grew up in Armstrong County, so I just wanted to put that out there. But in terms of, I think what's next for the Four Corners Rapid Response Team, we're really looking to launch a federal funding summit in northwest New Mexico. This will be a multi-day event where we tour multiple sites, multiple universities, and really bring federal officials to the community and sort of meet people where they are and sort of talk through the issues outside of a forum like this, but actually get to plant sites, potential industrial sites, and just really talk about the issues in real time. So looking forward to that in early September.
Kevin, I'm glad that you and all of the speakers unpacked what those summits look like, what the engagement looks like, because I feel like a lot of times it's how you engage with the communities that makes a big difference. And so meeting in person, being able to do the site visits, being able to talk about the money, not only from the federal perspective, but from the community perspective and from different angles in between, seems like it's a really helpful exercise to make sure we're actually closing that gap and not just either talking past each other, or what usually happens is the money is just elusive. It's just out there, but it's not coming to my region. It's not coming to my community. It's not going to help me. It's just too far away. So kind of making it attainable and kind of bringing it into perspective is really helpful. So with those questions that I've asked the panelists, time for your questions. Any questions from the audience for our panelists today?
There's a question.
What's the best example of capacity building that you've seen? Like, what does good capacity building look like?
So the question is, what does good capacity building look like? And I think this morning started off with a pretty good example of what that looks like in the form of all those VISTA staff that'll be around in different regions, for one. But I'll let the panelists answer what they think.
In addition to the VISTA members that are going to be assisting us, and Megan, just raise your hand. That's Megan Ziegler. She's with the Southwest Pennsylvania Hub. That was a gift to us through a philanthropic donation from the Heinz Foundation. And so that would be, I think, capacity building in terms of being able to work closely with us and identify where the funds are, where the grants are within the federal government, and then connecting the communities to those grants, helping with writing the grants, helping with managing the grants. So that's an area, I think, when I mentioned capacity, that's what we heard over and over from those that we're trying to support support in the county. So building that capacity to make sure they know where the money is and how they access the money. And then a part of that also is not just relying totally on Megan to help make that happen, but also making ourselves, no pressure, Megan, but making ourselves available in these 101s and 201s, these classes that we're holding, because like, for example, some of the counties didn't know about the technical assistance for brownfields. You know, we want to make sure that, and that's free. You know, they love to hear the words free. So we say, that's free, we can offer that to you. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking to continue to do to help build capacity.
And I'll maybe just add, in terms of the role in philanthropy, the role of philanthropy. Thank you. I need coffee. But I think the Just Transition Fund has been an absolutely great partner in terms of coming into communities and establishing capacity and seeing examples crossing states in the Four Corners region. There is a wonderful team in Arizona called Local First Arizona. And they have a Rolodex, to use an antiquated term, of grant writers that are on sort of warm standby on particular proposal topics to help communities sort of navigate the proposal process. So I think really engaging philanthropy in terms of addressing maybe immediate term capacity needs to help you sort of establish longer term enduring capacity, I think is a great step.
And I'll just add, I think it starts with collaboration. As an example, within Wyoming, applying for grants, navigating grants.gov came up as a major issue. Like, how do we even start looking at what we're eligible for? And so through these meetings, it came up as a major issue. And from a federal perspective, we can't provide grants training, right? We can't sit down with someone and tell them exactly how to do things, especially for certain grants. But through the collaboration with Wyoming stakeholders, it was like, we can't do that, but Senator Lummis's offices can, and they can provide a grants training, and they can hire a contractor, and then we can come in on the back end and talk about what funds are available. So we're able to build capacity in ways that the federal government may not be the answer, but because we're speaking so much, Drew Palmer in the State Budget Department always says, we never had a person to call. We just never knew who it was that we needed to go to. And most of the time, it's not me who has the answer. 99.9%, it's not me who has the answer, but it is my job to try to find the right person within the large federal government that is, and I think that's where we can really find ways to build capacity, and that's where I think this group is really, really effective, because it might not be EPA that's gonna help you, but I'm gonna help you find the right person.
I think, Carolyn, you already mentioned the economic recovery fellows that are out there too. I think that's another capacity value add that Economic Development Administration brought to the table. So Vista support, economic development fellow support. I know a lot of them are placed in communities that are also communities that are coal communities, energy transition communities. There's a lot of focus on energy transition. So having those people also in play for 3-year fellowships is something that's very helpful, because then you have that sustained support over a period of time, which we all know is what it takes to really make things start to change. Other questions? Oh, yeah.
I'm Lena Fowler, Coconino County Supervisor, and the coal power plant that shut down in Coconino County is the example of what not to do. That's why you all are sitting here. It was the Navajo Generating Station. I would recommend that we look at the census. These coal power plant, coal miners, once those are shut down, they end up working elsewhere throughout the country. The census, we and the rural communities, we lost out on census count because they're working now elsewhere. They had to be moved to work elsewhere. Even when somebody is in a detention temporarily in another county, they're counted over there. So rural communities lose out on these census the way that the policies are set up. And the other thing that happens is these were high-paying jobs, high degree, they disappear. And now you have to rebuild your demographics has changed. Now you have to start a vocational education center, which there's no money for. you start a collaboration with all the university, but it takes money to develop that, and there's no money for it. So it is, when you're all thinking about transition, we used to talk about 2044. It happened in 2 years. And so, these are actual things that happen. And so you don't have nonprofits in these rural communities, so where are you going to put all this money, and who are you going to go through with all the discussion that's going on right now? Those are things that you really have to really build up your community. We're still trying to recover. Our businesses are still shutting down because of the major industry that had shut down. So I really think we need to look at the census. I was on the Census Commission. We really fought it, but it already was in place. So I think we need to really look at the education side as well, because when businesses, we're talking about generating businesses, starting incubators and entrepreneurship, all of that is education. And yet we're not really talking about the core of where that is, because we're working on it all the time. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that perspective from Coconino County. I know that a lot of times we talk about kind of meeting communities where they're at, and it's oftentimes very challenging after the fact, after the closure, to pick up the pieces. It's a lot easier to talk about it in advance. And I think Kevin mentioned time, time being an asset. I mean, we talk a lot about money, we talk a lot about the need for funds. Time might be one of the most important assets that we all have for working together on this. Oh.
Come on. Come on
Come
out.
to our community and see what's going on.
Yeah, I'm planning to be there, talking to John Saltonstall in terms of your outdoor economic event at the end of October. And I think we're trying to replicate a federal funding summit similar to the ones, we executed in Joseph City and St. John. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Any other questions here for our panel? All right, well, I'm not seeing any hands here, but thank you all for being part of this conversation collectively over these 2 days here. Hopefully we together can close the gap, kind of solve that missing middle problem, and hopefully come up with some good solutions during these discussions. Thanks all. Thanks.
Thank you.